Believe it or not, there are good linebackers right now in the Philadelphia Eagles roster. Will Howie Roseman pay those linebackers? We're going to get into that and more on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm Louis DiBiase. We're brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Louis DiBiase riding solo, talking about the Eagles linebacker position. Believe it or not, strong play from that position over the last month. Want to talk about the future of Zack Baun, Nakobe Dean. Also, the NFL needs a non-quarterback MVP award. A.J. Brown is a main reason for this. Plus, it's Jacksonville Jaguars week. It's Doug Peterson week. Will Doug get fired after this matchup on Sunday? All that and more coming your way in this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles. But I do want to start with the linebacker position because, as I said, it's been, dare I say, they're not losing because of it. They're winning with linebacker, and sometimes this year they've been winning because of Zack Baun, because of Nakobe Dean. It feels very much like 2022, where, heading into the year where the expectations through the roof for TJ Edwards and Kazir White, no. We knew there was a floor there, and there was some excitement, especially with Nakobe Dean also being drafted in the third round, which felt like a steal. Last year, it was such a disaster letting those two free agents walk. This year, it feels like you're kind of back to that, where Zack Baun and Nakobe Dean are playing surprisingly well, especially Zack Baun, because when they signed this guy, it was to a one-year deal. You thought he'd be one of those overhang fourth or fifth guys in the rotation, playing with Brandon Graham and Nolan Smith, playing in that role. Instead, they've been using him as a stand-up linebacker, and he's been amazing. And Nakobe Dean, now that they're having him play more as a downhill, blitzing type of player, they're also unlocking Nakobe Dean from Georgia. The player we've seen the last 3 games from Nakobe, that is the guy we envisioned the Eagles would be stealing in the third round of the 2022 NFL draft. And we're getting that over the last few games, especially Zack Baun. And it's not just forcing fumbles as he did against the Cincinnati Bengals or getting those 2 sacks in the season opener against the Green Bay Packers. Quietly, Zack Baun's been really good in coverage. So I was just looking at coverage stats on NFL Pro and accidentally stumbled upon this stat that Zack Baun, when you combine not just linebackers, but safeties and corners as well, Zack Baun has combined the 11th highest coverage EPA in the entire NFL. Him and Nakobe Dean were the top 2 graded linebackers this week. So Howie has linebackers yet again playing well for this defense. The question is, because the same situation is going to come back up like it did at the end of 2022, when it's time to pay these guys, will Howie do it? Will he learn from his mistake of the 2023 offseason where he let TJ Edwards walk and Kazir White because of Nakobe Dean, and he said, I'll bargain Ben Hunt and find another Kazir White type of player on a cheap one-year deal and get that kind of play, and I'll bank on Nakobe Dean developing. Will he do that again? It didn't work out in 2023, or will he buck that trend like he did this year, paying a running back, and will he pay Zack Baun? I'm not sure if he's going to use that 2023 offseason as a way to learn a lesson and to try to do that differently, or if Zack Baun's play this year, despite last year's issues with Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham and Shaq Leonard and just the Band-Aid signings after Band-Aid signing that just didn't work out, Miles Jack too, who retired when you signed him, I do wonder if Baun's success this year and Dean's will confirm to him that his strategy is right, that he says, hey, okay, I know I can do this. I know I can find those guys on cheap one-year deals that will give me a good level of play. I don't need to draft somebody in the first or second round. I don't need to give anybody an extension or go out and sign a notable free agent because I know I have the ability 2 of 3 years. Sure, I stumbled in 2023, but I got Kazir White and Zack Baun on almost nothing contracts in 2 of 3 years and got really solid play. So I wonder if Baun's play will enhance and force, validate is the right word, validate Howie's strategy, or if he'll say, hey, I had a really good linebacker duo a couple years ago. It helped us make a Super Bowl. I let them walk in 2023. It was a main reason for our collapse personnel-wise on defense last year. I'm going to learn from that lesson and pay Baun. I'm really fascinated, and of course, this is more of an offseason conversation, but because Baun and Dean were the top 2 rated linebackers last week in the entire NFL, number 1 and number 2, I feel like it is a timely discussion to wonder about their future. I do wonder what Nakobe Dean's future, how that impacts Baun's future as well. Like, will Howie say, sure, I want Baun back, but Nakobe Dean only has 1 more year left on his rookie contract, and he's a 3rd rounder, so there's no 5th-year option or anything like that for team control. So I'm going to have to pay Nakobe Dean, and there's no way I'm investing 2 extensions at linebacker. I wonder if that will be a part of this too. It's going to be a very interesting thing to follow this offseason, especially if Baun and Dean continue this level of play, because they're playing at a very high level. Again, Nakobe and Baun has almost allowed Dean, as well as the presence of Cooper DeJean at the slot cornerback position now instead of Avonte Maddox. It's allowed Nakobe Dean to kind of just play more free and simple and just pin his ears back, go get the quarterback, and just go attack the football. Right? I do think having Zack Baun there, that guy really never makes a mistake. Again, in coverage, against the run, rushing the passer, having such a solid guy next to you like that, I think allows you to play more free. And they've both been really good. And it's crazy because I don't think I expected either to be someone I was banking on this year a whole lot. I thought it was going to be Devin White in the summer. That was your every down linebacker. And there was a point that I thought Jeremiah Trotter Jr., you guys can go back to a podcast in July where I said, is Trotter Jr. their best linebacker on this team? Is he better than Nakobe Dean? So the fact that not just one, but both of these guys are having the success that they are is so good for this football team. And it's showing you what you were missing last year. And yeah, again, am I somebody that likes to pay a bunch of linebackers top tier money and draft guys in the 1st and 2nd round? No, I want to invest like one solid asset in this position and just have one every down guy, and the rest is kind of whatever. But you can't go as far as Howie has in years past, where you just don't care about linebacker at all. It's very important, especially in a Vic Fangio defense. Just wonder if the strategy to find success at linebacker will continue for Howie, or if he'll buck his normal trend and keep maybe both Baun and Dean in house, or just one, or maybe none of them. I don't know. I'm very curious about that, but I thought of that because, again, Pro Football Focus graded those two out as the number 1 and number 2 player at their position after that Bengals game. Like, they were incredible. Against the run, Chase Brown barely averaged over 2 yards a carry. They were both in on that forced fumble at the end of the game that sealed the win. Like, those two were everywhere. And it's really nice to not watch a guy like Shaq Leonard run on, felt like the guy was in a wheelchair on the field. I mean, it was unbelievably piss poor play last year at linebacker, where we're saying to ourselves on the show, hey, Zach Cunningham's not that bad. No, he was. He was just the best of a really, really, really bad situation, where a guy you picked up at the end of August was the best thing you had. So it's really nice to not have to deal with that at this position, because it is more important than I think some people give on. And I just wonder if Howie will try to keep this core in-house. So definitely something to follow along. Let me know what you think. Do you want to extend Zack Baun at the end of the offseason? Hit us up on our YouTube community page and on X at LockedOnBirds and at DiBiase LOE. We will flip sides of the field and talk about offense coming up next. All about A.J. Brown right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, it's brought to you by Bilt, Bilt.com. So, guys, listen up. Renters, ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, Pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000. That's right. 700,000 hotels and properties involved. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Louis DiBiase riding solo. Gino's back on the show tomorrow. Crossover Thursday with Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars to preview Eagles, Jags on Sunday. I want to talk about A.J. Brown, and it's tough sometimes. I feel like I struggle when a player is just so obviously elite and they're good every single game at the same things, when they're good at everything all the time. It's sometimes interesting, or I would say difficult, challenging might be the right word, to create talking points about those players. It's why I always wonder how people covered the Patriots for 20 years. Like, how do you say Tom Brady's elite in different ways for 2 decades? Like, how many ways can you say that he's the greatest player of all time? You know what I mean? And I struggle with that with A.J. Brown. It might be why I talk about Devontae Smith more than A.J. But A.J. Brown, like, you do have to just kind of take a step back and appreciate how freaking incredible this guy is. Just look at some of these numbers. When A.J. Brown has been on the field this year, he is number 1 in the league in yards per route run versus press coverage. He is first in catch rate over expected. He is second. I should say the Eagles are second in offensive EPA when Brown is on the field. They are 4-0 when Brown is out there. They are 1-2 without him. They average almost 30 points a game with him, barely 20 without him. He is outside of Jalen Hurts, I would even say, should I say over Lane Johnson? Maybe it's 1A, 1B. He might be the most valuable. I know he's, to me, the most talented player on this team. He might be the most valuable Eagle that's not named Jalen Hurts. If it's not him, it's Lane Johnson. It is 1A, 1B. But this team, like, they just don't move the same without this guy. And it really made me think that we need an award. And I guess Offensive Player of the Year, you could kind of use that in this way because quarterbacks just don't ever get that award. MVP is a quarterback award, and then Offensive Player of the Year normally goes to the best non-quarterback of the season. But I kind of want, if we're not going to make that award the most valuable non-quarterback, I kind of want that to be an award, right? Like, not who puts up the best stats, who has the best story, blah, blah, blah. You know how awards are given out in sports. I kind of want a non-QB MVP. And they probably won't ever label it anything close to that because then they're admitting that the MVP award is a quarterback award. But we all know it is. I mean, when was the last time somebody won MVP that wasn't a quarterback? Adrian Peterson, like almost 15 years ago. It hasn't happened really consistently since the 1990s and back. This is a QB award. And if they did have that award, if that award existed where there was an award about an offensive player and it had to do with value, maybe MVP sometimes doesn't even have to do with value. I think a lot of the times who wins MVP is not the most valuable player in the league, but I digress. But if there was an award about value for an offensive player that's not a quarterback, there's a lot of, and you could say like Saquon Barkley has a case for this. You could talk about Justin Jefferson. You could talk about Derrick Henry in Baltimore. There's so many players that would have a good argument to win that award. A.J. Brown is one of the top guys that would have my vote. He might have my vote. Again, he is maybe the best football player in the league at his position. Like, I think in a redraft, if all players were thrown back into a pool, general managers might take him over Justin Jefferson. I think personally, I would. I think A.J. Brown, statistically, he is right now the best receiver in the league. He's not leading the league in receiving yards because he missed those, 2-3 games, but He, to me, is the best player in football at his position. And I think, again, if you take one player that's not named Jalen Hurts off this roster, what impact, like who is impacting this team the most negatively when they're not on the field? It's probably AJ. Like, it is really astounding what he has done for this football team over the last 3 years. The craziest part, as you heard with that one stat, like he has the highest catch rate over expected. Devontae Smith is number 3. He's tied for 3rd on that list with Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys. Has a team had such a dramatic turnaround, like change in luck at a position like the Eagles have had at wide receiver, where for so many years they were so terrible at evaluating talent at this position, acquiring talent through not only trades, not only the draft, not only free agency, but every avenue, to then have 2 of the best 10 receivers in football. Again, it's hard sometimes to come up with different talking points about them when they're so good all of the time. But I'm seeing all these A.J. Brown stats on X every single day, how he's number 1 against single man coverage. Like, you cannot put a corner on him man to man. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be prime Deion Sanders for this point. And at this point, Brown's going to win. Like, he is almost unguardable right now. He's one of the last big elite receivers in the league, but he's still an elite route runner, run after the catch, blocker. He's everything for this football team. And I think he just needs to be appreciated. And I was like, I want to talk about A.J. Brown today. How do I spin it? Well, there we go. There's our angle. If there was an award that went to an MVP of a team and it wasn't a quarterback award, like quarterbacks weren't allowed to have it, A.J. Brown, he makes a good case to win that. Again, the Eagles, now with A.J. Brown, since he's come back, have rattled off 3 straight wins, all of them in large part are thanks to him. Instead of 2-2 looking dead in the water, where I'm talking about firing the coach and replacing the quarterback, we're not talking about the 5-2 Eagles that have a chance to win a Super Bowl again. And there's a lot of reasons that we have changed our tone dramatically, especially me. Jalen's play, the lack of turnovers, the coaching's been way better. The defense has been top 10 and top 3 in almost every stat there is that you could pull up, that you can make up or you can find on a website. But let's be real. The biggest change coming out of the bye week is that A.J. Brown's healthy now and playing elite football. So I think he might have my vote if there was an MVP award that went to somebody that wasn't a quarterback. A.J. Brown's a Philadelphia Eagle, and I know it's been 3 years now, but I still don't believe it. It's one of the greatest trades in franchise history. And for the Titans, it might be the worst. All right, guys, coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, agree or disagree, and it has to do with Doug Peterson. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and they're going to get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. So just bet with me at LOE3 every Friday. I hammered the anytime touchdown for Devontae Smith this week and the over on 5.5 receptions. Nailed both. If you bet $5 on those bets, you get $150 back in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app, it gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're wrapping up this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I always stutter with that because the days are flying by, the season's flying by. Can't believe there's already been 7 games. The Eagles are 5-2, and now it's Kelly Green week as they take on Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are reeling right now and might be the end of Doug. And that sucks because, you know, I know how everything ended with Doug Peterson in 2020, and you know, I've defended him. I think a lot of what happened in Philly wasn't his fault. I think a lot of it had to do with Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie. They made it very difficult on him. Carson Wentz regressing as well. I don't think had much to do with him. But I will say, Doug had his hand in the downfall. He's loyal to a fault, sometimes to the wrong coaches, i.e. Carson Walsh, Mike Groh, Press Taylor, who might be his downfall again in Jacksonville. But the guy won you a Super Bowl. He had another incredible run in 2018. I think what he did as a coach in 2019 to get that team to a division title is very impressive as well. Doug should be a hero in Philly forever. He's got a statue outside of the stadium. He's the first guy to win you a Lombardi trophy as a head coach, and that to me will always put him on the Mount Rushmore of this organization. But it is fascinating to see why he's falling down again. How he starts fast in Jacksonville, his first year there. They win a playoff game and almost beat the Chiefs in Kansas City in the divisional round. Last year they're 8-3, and then they kind of collapse. And this year they've only won 2 games. Why has it happened for Doug? I think it's 2 completely different situations. But one constant I would say is, again, he's very loyal. He's very loyal to his coaches, and I think that's a pro and a con for Doug, right? I think that's why players love him, is his loyalty to guys, is his passion for, he's a rider for sure, for his players, for his coaches, and he stands on that even if it's going to cost him his job. And I've always admired that. But he chooses sometimes the wrong guys to be loyal to, and Press Taylor calling plays this year, I can't imagine has really helped. And it's kind of interesting, Doug's been blaming players during press conferences. He seems exhausted, maybe just sick of these kind of situations. I'm not sure. Either way, it's not good in Jacksonville. And it's only a matter of time before he's fired. I don't know if it's going to be in season, but I can't imagine he survives this year unless they go on some crazy second half of the year run. So the question is, considering, too, he's without Cam Robinson, their starting left tackle, they just traded to Minnesota. Brian Thomas is going to be out for this game. Christian Kirk is going to be out for this game. Gabe Davis might be out for this game. So Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson might be without their starting left tackle and all 3 of their starting receivers. And Travis Etienne might play, but he's banged up too. This offense, they might end up calling up Greg Ward and Deontay Burnett in the 2019 Birds. It's very familiar territory for Doug, but it's not great as he comes to Philly against a red-hot Eagles team that's won 3 straight. So odds are I think the Eagles are going to and they're wearing Kelly Green too. They don't lose in that jersey. Odds are they're going to smoke Jacksonville. Knock on wood, but I think they're going to smoke them. So the question for agree or disagree is this. You don't want to be the reason Doug Peterson gets fired. Agree or disagree? Obviously, I'm not saying you want the Jaguars to win so he survives. But do you want to, I'm curious how people feel, do you want when the Eagles, if they beat them on Sunday and he gets fired, is that cool to you? I do wonder how people feel about Doug in Philly still. I'm not sure if the tone is the same as others. I'm very curious about that. I really hope he's not fired this week. I love Doug. Again, he won you a Super Bowl. And I know it's been 7 years now, but I don't know. I think he still doesn't get enough credit in Philadelphia. Maybe it's because of what Andy Reid's done in Kansas City and the longevity of his time in Philly. And Nick Sirianni's won a lot of games in his first 4 years, showing another Eagles head coach starts fast. But I totally agree that I don't want the Eagles to be the reason Doug gets fired. I hope the game is at least close enough where, I'm not going to say I don't want a 40-3 win, but I would like him to make it back on the plane and get back to Jacksonville. I don't know. That's at least me. So I agree that I don't want him to get fired after this game. But I think some people think it's a flex if you get a coach fired, if you dominate them and you get back at a former Eagle. I don't know. Maybe this is a total reach and everybody loves Doug, but I don't see the same kind of praise for him as I would expect. I don't know. Maybe it's because he's still in the NFL, and maybe time will do that, and maybe it's just a bad taste in your mouth of what happened in 2020. Maybe you think 2017 was a mirage because of what happened from 2018 to 2020. I'm not so sure. But, yeah, I totally agree with that. I love Doug, and I don't want to see him get fired after this game. And it's such a tough situation with, all the injuries, too. So we'll see. It's crazy, though, how time really changes things in the NFL. This guy, again, won a Super Bowl, made the playoffs 2 straight years after that in tough circumstances. he takes over for the most miserable team in the league that was run by Urban Meyer, and they win one of the greatest comeback playoff games I've ever seen. And they almost beat the Chiefs in the divisional round. Last year, they're 5 games over 500 and halfway through the year. Trevor Lawrence, they're considering like an MVP candidate almost, right? They're like, I think they were the 1 seed at one point in the AFC, and then they totally collapse, and now they're just a shell of that team. So it's just, man, the NFL comes in waves, and for Doug Peterson, it's been a roller coaster ride. But at least the roller coaster was at the top in 2017. We'll continue to dive deeper into that matchup tomorrow. Geno and Wiggs, they got you covered for Crossover Thursday. Until then, Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We'll see you tomorrow. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening. And let's go, Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.